Government's paying people to dig holes and fill them in again.
No, what you end up with, I think, in a properly run public service employment or job guarantee program are the local communities themselves engaging in the process and deciding what they value and the kind of work that would be the most meaningful, add the most value to their lives and their community. So what you might imagine is a program that is federally funded, but highly decentralized, locally administered, so that people in, I'll use the US case, in northeastern Oklahoma know best what the needs of that community are. The federal government does not, but the federal government can provide the funding so that people can be hired and employed. We did this in the New Deal era. We had the Works Progress Administration. We had the Civilian Conservation Corps. We had a jobs program for young people called the National Youth Administration. So FDR rolled out a whole alphabet soup of public job programs, and we could seriously consider modeling job programs today on something like that. It wouldn't preclude a basic income. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, and other civil rights leaders, they said there should be a basic income for those who cannot or should not work. And so we can decide as a society who falls into those categories of, people that should not be in the workforce, but there ought to be a way for those who want to work to have employment if they choose it and can't find it anywhere else in the economy. As Joe said, there is a great deal of work, as both of them said. There is plenty of work that needs to be done.
OK, well, I'm glad to say that Stephen Moore is back with us after doing a bit of work with the White House. I want your views on a universal basic income and, of course, what you were hearing there about an FDR-type New Deal for the 21st century. But can you share with us, feedback to us, any of your discussions with your White House colleagues?
Well, I would, but I'd have to kill you. I'm just teasing.
I don't think you'd be able to get over here.
I was very proud to work with the president on his campaign as an economic advisor. We put together a plan that cut taxes on our businesses to make America more competitive. We slashed regulations. We put in place new trade deals that made America more competitive and that worked more to America's advantage. We created the best economy in 30 or 40 years. We had a 3.5% unemployment rate until the coronavirus hit. We had 6 million surplus jobs. I hear you all talking about, gee, how do we create jobs? Donald Trump did it. We had the best, we had rising wages for every income group. Minorities saw the biggest increases in wages. It was a beautiful thing, the best economy. So how do we rebuild the economy? We do exactly what we were doing before. We reduce taxes. We reduce regulations and red tape that are onerous on businesses. And we have good trade deals. And by the way, a big part of that is our energy policy. The idea that we're going to give up our oil and gas and coal is ridiculous. Those are major sectors of our economy. But we do know how to create jobs. We did a great job of it. And that's going to be really what this election coming up in November is going to be about. Do you want to create the kind of economy that we had under Donald Trump before the coronavirus hit, where 68% of Americans felt like the economy was going in the right direction? And I would just say one other thing. This is an international audience. Folks, it is not complicated. Reduce your taxes on your businesses. Reward them by reducing regulations that don't make sense. Do things that are making your own economies and businesses more competitive, and get the government the hell out of the way. That's what Donald Trump did, and boy, did it work.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, the other panelists are taking a radically different view on that than you. Now, we've got a very important question coming up, I know, but I just want to very briefly, if you would, to the other three of you, address that issue. Tax cuts and allow the market and entrepreneurs to shape the future economy. Stephanie Kelton.
Look, we know what happened with these tax cuts. The way the personal income tax cuts were structured in the tax cuts that were passed at the end of 2017, 83% of the benefits went to people in the top 1% of the income distribution. This is simply funneling a windfall to the people who least need the help. On the corporate side, you say cut taxes for your business, and this is how to rain jobs down on the rest of the economy. But we know that businesses overwhelmingly took those windfalls and did what? mergers and acquisitions and stock buybacks. They did not raise wages. They did not increase hiring. So, especially in an environment like this, the way to incentivize businesses to hire people back is to swamp them with customers. And the way to swamp them with customers is to build robust increases in people's incomes. Jobs, incomes create consumers who create demand, who create jobs.
But Lord Brown, don't tax cuts put money in people's pockets and create demand?
It depends how they're done. And I think I'm all in favor of incentives for business that create opportunities and actually create investment. I think that is really very important because that's about the future. So I think that's essential. I also think that while regulations can be misplaced, equally, I think a totally free corporate sector would not be a sector I'd want. It is something that has to be contained by the interests of all stakeholders, not just investors, but also employees and the communities and the people who don't have a voice, the environment and so forth. So I think that I don't buy a package of total liberalization. I buy a package of balanced activity. If tax cuts lead to really better investment, and so far they've not done that in the United States, then I think it would be a great thing to have.
OK, listen, we've got some, we are indeed beginning to run out of time. So we've got a very important question, as I say, coming up from one of our virtual audience. This is from Amber Curry in Oxfordshire. Please fire away, Amber.
Hello, thanks for having me. As a recent graduate, I'm worried about how I can enter an industry that is so reliant on face-to-face contact. I've deferred my master's as a result of COVID-19, but will I be able to gain industry experience in the meantime? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Amber. Very important. And Joseph Stiglitz, we've touched on this already, but let's address it directly. This crisis is generational. It's young people who are not getting training, not going to get jobs to save older people. That's what the statistics tell us about coronavirus. Sorry, Professor Stiglitz, I wondered if you could still hear me. The question about the generational divide.
Yes, we've had a generational divide. It's actually been going on for a long time. One of the problems is that wages have been stagnant. And this has been particularly true in recent years. And part of the reason is unfettered capitalism hasn't been working for ordinary individuals. At the bottom, the wages in the United States, for instance, are the same as they were 60 years ago. Median income, income in the middle, has been stagnating. So, in fact, the market has created this divide between the young people and the old. They can't buy houses. They're left with huge amounts of student debt to go to school. In the United States, over $1.5 trillion. Now, the question that you asked is, what about the jobs? And it seems to me that what we need to do in the face of the pandemic is to say every young person should either be in a job, in school, or in some kind of a training program. And the pandemic will be over eventually. I feel confident of that. And the question is, what is going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years? Are the years going to be wasted, or can you get some skills that will provide you with better opportunities in the post-pandemic world? And that's what we need to be focusing on right now.
Stephanie Kelton, we've touched on this a little bit earlier as well. And can I ask you what we're seeing on the streets of so many American cities at the moment? Yes, of course, sparked by a racist killing, but we're seeing many, many young people in particular. There's unemployment, there's inequality rife in the United States and indeed countries like the one I'm in at the moment. Is this perhaps one of the outcomes that we could continue to see from this crisis?
I mean, people in distress will take to the streets and let you know that they are in distress. So at the moment, you're right. What we're seeing are a lot of protests that are being driven by the fact that, we continue to see again and again and again in this country, police officers taking the lives of African Americans, murdering them on the streets. We see these images all the time. It's festering. It's coming with the backdrop of COVID-19, where we're all uniquely, keenly aware of the fact that the frontline workers who bore disproportionately the pain associated with job losses, income losses, and so forth were people of color. So we see the inequities. We see how unfair this is. What you have are Blacks and whites and Latinos and Asians, Americans and Native people are coming together to say this is unjust. All of it, not just the killings, but the whole of the system is rotten. And people are saying we are not going to stand for an economic and social system that operates this way in the future.
And Stephen Moore, well, clearly, obviously not to be condoned, but is it understandable then what is happening on the streets of these American cities?
Is it understandable? Well, I think the better question is it justifiable? And I think almost everyone agrees that this criminal behavior has to stop. And I think President Trump is right that we have to stop the rioting and looting. It is outrageous. It is hurting the very people in these communities that have been afflicted by, with low incomes and so on. So it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing we're seeing in these cities. And frankly, I think Americans are sick and tired of people apologizing for really radical behavior that, as I said, is hurting these very people who are supposed to be benefiting from this. Now, look, we have two Americas right now. We have an America of red states. That's what's kind of unique about the United States, that the states really do run the show. And we have red states like Georgia and Florida and Texas and Tennessee that are booming, absolutely booming, have had twice the rate of growth and twice the rate of job creation over the last 20 years. And then you have these states like New York and Connecticut and New Jersey and my home state of Illinois and other states that are run by Democrats that have been run into the ground. And those are the places where the riots have been worse. So why don't we use the policies that work? Lower taxes, lower regulations. I'm not saying we shouldn't have any regulations. I'm saying we should reward our businesses for hiring people and doing a great job and expanding. And look, we had a great economy 2.5 months ago. There was no unemployment. There were 6 million surplus jobs in this country. It was the best labor market we ever had. We've got to get back to those policies. But no, we can never justify violence, and we can never justify people burning down buildings and spray painting obscenities on churches. We can't tolerate that.
Of course, no one's justifying it. The question was if we can understand the forces that are driving it. I just want to bring Amber back in there because, Amber, I saw you reacting to that, and I don't know what your thoughts were. So share them with us, what you're hearing there.
I just think that the issue really, and I can't speak as I'm not an American, but it to me really seems like it's not about looting and violence. And I think the violence that needs to be stopped is coming more from the police rather than any protesters.
OK, well, thank you for that input, Amber. And I just want to hear from Lord Brown. And, let's broaden this out about young people like Amber. They're the seed capital of future society, of future economies. If we get this wrong, we could be in trouble.
Absolutely. We must not get it wrong. And the problem is judging it in the middle of the turmoil of today, where there's a lot of people without jobs because there's not a lot of activity. But again, I come back to, building a different world requires a lot of different skills, and that world will be different. Just simply the amount and changing of the way we live and work, what we're doing today on Skype, for example, will change the demands we have on infrastructure, the demands we have on the cloud, the demands we have on all sorts of things. This will require a lot more effort. And we need young people to do that, to aspire to do things to change society too in a low carbon world. So I think we need a bit of patience. We need to force, absolutely, the educational and training systems to be fit for purpose for the future, and to do this now while we have time. And I think that is beginning to happen. I'm very struck by the fact that many universities have said, we can't teach except face-to-face, and they've all said, we're teaching online. It's a very big change. And it says that a lot of things can change very quickly.
OK, well, that's, I'm afraid, believe it or not, almost it for tonight. But before we go, I want to take a final straw poll from our virtual audience. Hello again. Let's work your hands for one more time, and thank you for your great questions. By a show of hands, I want to ask you simply, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the economic future? So the optimists, please, put your hands up. Optimists. Oh, that's not bad. That's probably maybe over a third. Well, just very quickly, can I ask you then, how many of you have become optimists because of what you've heard tonight? Right. OK. Well, one of you, at least we've changed one mind. Thank you all very much indeed. So tonight we've heard arguments in favour of a universal basic income. The audience in favour, the experts not. Calls for more intervention to support young people survive any economic downturn. And the lockdown described as the greatest political and economic blunder of modern times. Well, my thanks, first of all, to our panellists tonight. You know them all by now. Joseph Stiglitz, Lord Brown, Stephanie Kelton and Stephen Moore. Not once, but twice. Thank you all very much indeed. And thanks too to everyone in our virtual studio audience, getting those hands up and down. Some brilliant questions. Thank you for taking part. Those questions really did expand our understanding, I hope. And thank you at home for watching. We've got much more to come this week, including an exclusive interview with the Prince of Wales on his experience of the lockdown and the changes facing the public, the country and the world. We'll bring you that on Thursday nights. More world-changing ideas tomorrow evening, when I'll be joined by, among others, one of the country's leading scientists, Sir Jeremy Farrar. That's at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. Do join us then if you can. For now, good night.